Hui-chin, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kate. So nice to be here.
So I was thinking right before we just went live about how many times you and I have chatted to each other over the years, and you have been all over the world, and I have been all over the world, and go figure, we're actually chatting from the same time zone right now.
I know. That's yeah, I think that just happened since you moved. So yay, great for us.
Yeah, I think it's the first time. I was just thinking about that. And I was like, wait, where are you located? Because we both played, where in the world is the other person when we've talked. So, but that
Mhm.
further emphasizes what a small world it is, that all these conversations we've had, we've often not known where the other person is even located because we can chat anywhere in the world. We can work together anywhere in the world and collaborate. And if that
Mhm.
hasn't been emphasized over the last year, I don't know what has.
Yeah, I know the COVID thing. I think if anything good comes out of it, is I think more people realize where you are is not necessarily a impediment to what you want to do. So I think that's a great, outcome.
Yeah, it's a really great outcome, and it's been interesting to me how many people have reached out to me, and I imagine how many people have also reached out to you in the last couple of weeks or months. I think as restrictions are getting lifted and people are looking forward to traveling, especially a lot of couples, and these are, since I work with financial planners, actually all financial planners, where one or the other spouse wants to relocate, either because they have dual citizenship or they have a job opportunity. And so I want to start by talking about financial planners living and working around the world. And then we'll dive into kind of the client side. But how many countries have you lived in? I mean, what, even over the last decade?
Um, the lose count a bit every time we talked about this, but
Right.
I think that the latest count is 7 countries. In the last is 2021, so about 11, 12 years.
Yeah,
Yeah. hmm
that's
So
wild. And what
yeah.
takes you all over the world?
So initially, Well, going back to my original stories, I'm actually an immigrant to the U.S. I came here for grad school and I stayed for my first job after grad school. But my first, what I consider like the real, I guess, globe trotting experience, I left my job in the U.S. and moved to India for a nonprofit job. So that was my first career before I became a financial planner. But after that, my husband and I decided to get married at the time, and then he joined the Foreign Service with the U.S. Department of State. And since then, we've been traveling for him, and he also switched jobs a couple of times as well, which is how we now came back to the U.S. in the nation's capital.
Yeah. So how then did you get into financial planning out of curiosity?
I got into financial planning. I think a lot of the couples who are hoping to travel together would probably relate that one person has a job opportunity, the other not necessarily. So for me, it was a good opportunity. When at that point, I was really thinking about what I want to do with my life, beyond my last career, and then having the opportunity to move overseas when somebody else has a job to support you give me the opportunity to actually look for things I want to do. And financial planning was the thing that propped up, as a newlywed. The first thing you think about is, oh, now we have joint finances, or maybe we shouldn't have joint finances. Like
Yeah.
starting from that point, it goes on and become, my career.
Yeah, and that's a common thing. I mean, I know a number of financial planners who have spouses in, the military service, and so they move a lot and they have no idea where they're going to be located 18 months from now. And so they love the flexibility of being able to have a financial planning business like you do and be able to work from anywhere. But one of the challenges that we always run into and that I certainly get asked about a lot is making sure that you're actually properly licensed and registered in jurisdictions where you are serving people. How have you handled that across all the countries you've lived in?
Um, First of all, I wasn't always, how should I call it? Um, self-employed throughout all that entire time as a financial planner. I actually worked as an employee in a wealth management firm in another country as well. So that allowed me to sort of accumulate experience through this journey. So I would say if there is any opportunity for you to be employed locally, which is usually more possible if you're going with a diplomatic mission or military, or some countries with bilateral agreement, where if you're going with a executives in private sector, you are afforded the bilateral agreement to be able to work on local economy with the existing visa without applying for work visa, or maybe applying for work visa is easy. So that's one option, and obviously don't have to worry about registrations and things like that. The other thing about working with the US population, or at least in the US, is that you, for meeting a threshold of registration for working with US population, so a lot of people know that there's SEC and the state registration. A lot of the foreign advisors were able to advise the US population, US tax residents, without being registered in the US, because they're considered foreign advisors up to a certain threshold. And for US advisors who are only seeking to advise US clients and not hold themselves to market themselves to local population, a lot of time there are exemptions, but they're all very location specific. You need to know exactly the law regulations in the country you're in, and making sure whatever you're doing doesn't step on the red line. But it doesn't mean that there's nothing you can do, obviously.
Yeah. Well, and I'll also state that, anything you and I say in this, we are not compliance specialists. We are not regulatory specialists. This is not advice. So anything you hear us say, still double check it, because it also changes all the time. But I like that idea of if you can work locally, and that is a question I get asked a lot, is, even college grads I've had reach out to me and say, hey, I would love to do an internship in another country. So what about, since you've done that, learning all of the local intricacies of financial planning across, tax and estate and investments and pensions and all that?
Yeah, obviously, in a sense, you're kind of just starting from scratch, right? So part of, at least for me and my part of my time there, in my financial planner journey, I'm new to everything. So for me, it's basically almost like an entry-level job that I can learn, about financial planning and wealth management, but in a different country, and then just learn everything from scratch. Obviously, if you have 10, 20 years experience in the financial planning industry, you don't want to start from scratch, but you can think about what you can provide advisors in other countries with your expertise. So perhaps you're the only, advisor is fluent in English, or any advisor has any knowledge of the US law. And as many countries around the world, the US is a common destination for immigration, for wanting to study in the US, wanting to invest in the US. So bring whatever you can to that setting may help you, find a position that may not be necessarily the existing financial planning career, but it will actually allow you to stay in the field.
Yeah, and I like that, because I often, suggest that as well, that really it's an asset. And so even if you don't know the, local regulations, let's say, you're an American going to the UK. Well, there are, quite a few expat Americans in the UK. So you can actually bring that level of expertise. And I know you work with expats around. So, using that to your advantage is a huge leg up. And even coming the other way, tons of people want to come to the US, and the visa thing can be trickier. The, work related stuff can be trickier, and trying to get the visas for people to work in the US. I've talked with a number of firms. They're not all willing to do it, but a number of them are. And again, I try to emphasize, look, this is actually a huge asset, because we've got, every culture in the US, and there are people here that need financial planning. So how great is it that we can continue to have financial planners that are able to provide that?
Exactly. Yeah, US, it is, compared to some other countries, is difficult to come here solely for work and having somebody to sponsor you. But I've definitely seen many more examples sort of similar to me. You know, they married American from overseas and they're moving back to the US. So they're starting, you know, everything from scratch and learning, you know, the not just financial planning, the culture, the, you know, what's important, and for their own finances as well. So I think keeping an open mind and just treat it as part of your, you know, journey is the healthy way to think of it.
Yeah, and the US is complicated. I mean, we could name 50 other countries and then realize that we've got, 50 different rules across all of our states when it comes to regulation, when it comes to estate planning, when it comes to all these crazy things. I mean, the US is wildly complicated.
Yes, and I think that kind of like, I also like to call it a home country bias. I know, like in investment, we call home country bias on what we only stick with what we're familiar with. But because how complicated US is, I guess the advisors are coming out of US who are familiar with international situations. Sometimes they also overcomplicate things because in the US it's always so complicated. But like not all cross-border situations as complicated. You can easily move across maybe two countries where there is just, they only deal with financial ties or income tax or anything to their citizens, or only internally people who live there or have income locally, and they don't care any financial resources you make from overseas. You can have move around in those countries, which a lot of, I guess, the newly globally nomads type people tend to go with that kind of situation, where you don't really create that kind of difficulty for you. So that's also the other side of this as well.
Yeah, well, and that brings us kind of to the next thing, which is there's financial planners that want to live and work around the world. And then there's all of these clients. And I was trying to look up what the actual numbers of global expats are. And the numbers are all over the place. And one was like 50 million, one was 108 million, one was 62 million. Point being, there are tens of millions of expats around the world that are going to have these global financial planning challenges. And for all the reasons that you've talked about, it could be from marrying someone from another country. It could be traveling for work where you might be on a contract for, 2 to 10 years that turns into permanent. It could be just for fun because you want to live in a different country. So what should financial planners be thinking about when they encounter these situations, if that's not their core operation and knowledge center in terms of cross-border or global financial planning?
Well, if you've never dealt with this situation and you do not wish to learn about this type of situation, I would say avoid it if that's not something you want to learn. Because once you step into it, you will just continue to find new things you need to know. Which is really, if you think about it, is the same with any kind of planning in any kind of niche area, right? Like you don't want to, like, if you never have to work with somebody with student loans, you're just blissfully ignorant of all the things you can do with student loans. It's the same thing with working with any kind of clients with global mobility or global connections, that once you step into it, you're just going to find more and more things that you need to know. So I would say first decide whether you want to learn or not. If you just don't want to, find a good referral source of community of people that deal with that. I don't want to jump directly to the CIGA network, which is a network like that where I started this year for advisors around the world who work with international clients in different kind of situations, either expats, immigrants, just globally mobile, multiple citizenship, marry somebody from a different country, whatever their niche area is within global planning situation. The idea is that we always know something, that we know something other people don't, and vice versa. So we can deal with that as we grow and learn together. So I would say that's one approach, either deal with it or not deal with it. But then the other part is, okay, once maybe you have natural connection to this population, either you're one of them or you just have a lot of clients like that. I tend to work with, I know some advisors, they don't intentionally try to work with people like that, but they just end up because their niche is people who retire early. So people who retire early travel. And when you travel, you figure out different things you want to do, either stay locally or you start, you retire early. So maybe you get some just random contract, or you start blogging, you have self-employment income while living overseas. So so if you are the type of advisors that you feel like you do want to work with clients with any kind of international connection and you want to learn more about it, the best way to start thinking about it is just understanding the entry and exit from US or whatever country it is to the other country. And I would think most of the advisors, maybe on this podcast or not, to deal with financial planning in some sort. And you think about investment, you think about taxes, you think about insurance, all the different things that we covered in CFP curriculum or other type of independent financial certification. And whenever you think about any criteria, I still do this a lot for my client. It's like, okay, we're thinking about this particular issue. How does this country treat this? How does current country treat this? How does the future country treat this? How do they interact with each other? This is really the only way you can make sure you're not missing anything. Of course, there are advisors that have been practicing in this area for a long time, and they focus a very niche area, for example, US UK, right? And they only deal with US UK and only deal with executives that work with these companies. So because their international practice so focused, they no longer have to do as much of this kind of detailed analysis on so many different scenarios after maybe 20 years. But
I like what you've started with the CIGA network. I like that collaboration aspect, and we'll dive more into kind of what CIGA network even stands for and how that works. But I love the idea of, like you said, if you aren't familiar with student loans, then try to make sure you don't know just enough to be dangerous. But you also touched on quite a few things there. So if you have clients that are, and that was another great example, they retire and they're like, oh, I'm going to go move to Ecuador, right? Then what are all the things you should be thinking about? And that's one of the challenging things is, it's easy to just think, okay, well, what about investments or what about taxes? But there are actually a lot more things. So, currency fluctuations, and how do you manage that? So walk us through just what are a couple of those, things that maybe financial planners wouldn't instantly think about.
Okay. So you just throw me in a question that has 1,000 words answer. But okay, let's talk about two things that most people don't think about when clients say they want to move overseas. And maybe it's because coming from the background of my husband working in the foreign service and arena and doing like consular work occasionally. The idea is, immigration is a huge topic in the U.S., but it's basically what's your legal status in another country? Of course, there are now more countries that are open to, retirees moving there for their economy and things like that. But understanding your visa type and what does that visa type correspond to your tax status. And a lot of time the tax status is temporary because the visa type. And if you want to stay longer, or if you have you start work locally, or you start buying property locally, that changes what's taxable locally or not. So one big thing is really, how do you expect to remain in that country legally? And how does that change your tax status or not? How does that change your access to your funds in the US or other country, your home country, where your resources are coming from? When does that, when will that change, basically? when does your visa status or tax status change depending on how long you stay there or what you do differently and things like that. So as financial planner, we don't normally go there directly because it sounds like kind of legal advice. It sounds more like immigration advice, but without knowing those things, you don't really know how to plan around their finances.
Wow. and that's a really big challenge, you know. And then people, I mean, I've had friends around the world, and even myself when I lived in Australia, you have the I don't know if I'm going to stay here. I don't know if I'm going to come back. You know, I worked in Australia, so I had a superannuation, kind of like a 401k plan, a pension plan, and you know, I didn't know, should I take it out when I leave? Should I leave it there? Am I going to come back? You know, and those are all challenging things, which kind of gets back to the, if you don't want to totally go there and specialize in that, it's better to collaborate with someone who has that expertise.
Exactly. And as you work with more people who actually have that global mobility, it's, at least for my clients, it's never going to be, all I need to know is, you know, the laws between US and this country, and it's done. Because after you learn everything, they're going to move. You're going to start thinking about, again, okay, how do they exit or not exit, right? Like, sort of the other end of what you talk about, Kate, you know, like you went through the period of time not knowing whether you'll stay or not, and then suddenly you decided, I'm staying. And then the staying part creates all these planning opportunities or not, right? And then maybe down the road, it changes again. And this time you have family with you, and you have spouses and children, they're dual citizen. Yeah. So is all I can say about that is just, we should never expect clients' life to follow a pattern. You know, like we're in a profession to help them live, you know, their ideal life. So we help them simplify it, but also we can't just say that you should simplify your life, so don't move.
Financial planners, you know, let's say somebody from the UK wants to live in France for part of the year, or you know, I don't know, the Maldives, whatever. Like, you know what I mean? It can be that there are enough expats out there that if you did want to carve out that niche, you could actually, I think, build a great business. And if you are going through those experiences as well, then you're also learning. And even weird thing, you know, sometimes getting a bank account in another country is a pain. And how do you most effectively transfer money and deal with currency fluctuations? And if you're living that as well, then that can be a great way to tie your own passions or your own family ties in with your business.
Exactly. And I should make that clear too, that sort of doing that kind of having a global, more frequent global sort of move or globally mobile lifestyle is in itself a specialty, right? Like you will see people, like that's what they do. They don't try to establish tax residency anywhere, but they're trying to just travel around the world for 3 years. But that also have implication on how you manage your finance. Exactly what you're saying. Okay, so you're not going to start a bank account anywhere. You're not going to be able to, you know, prove that you're a resident anywhere. I guess other than your U.S. citizen. How does that change how you manage money on the go?
Yeah. Well, and insurance. That's another big one. How do you make sure that you're insured while you're traveling around the world? So all these little things to think about. So I want to make sure that we do touch on the CIGA network. So can you first share where that name came from and what it stands for?
Okay, the CIGA network is spelled CIGA. It's Collaborative Independence Global Advisory Network. So as the name suggests, I envision it to be where global advisors that work with globally connected and mobile clients come together and collaborate eventually. But the 3 C's I always throw out there is connect, co-educate, and collaborate. So before we can collaborate, we need to establish a certain number of trust, right? So so in this community, you get to know about each other's specialty, what you're what you are focusing on specifically, either country-wise or lifestyle-wise, or any specific investment, or you focus on tax. You have the right people to go to as your client's life take them to different places. The coeducation is also important because that's one thing where established advisors in this field will tell you it's difficult to find one source to figure out everything out. And most of the people who have been doing this are all very resourceful. Like, you just keep chasing leads after leads after leads, figuring out what's the right thing to do for clients. So eventually we need to realize we're not like spinning the wheel, in the sense that everybody has worked with clients in certain situations, and we can really all learn from each other. So that's where coeducation comes from, and hopefully we can collaborate when it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I love CIGA. So even share where, even though that's an acronym, but how the word relates to where you're from.
Yeah, so I'm from Taiwan. CIGA is sounds a bit similar. It's not exactly same. So the word for world in Taiwanese is Seigai. So it sounds similar to CIGA as well. I want to make that connection, put Taiwan on the map.
I like that. I think that's very cool. And so you recently launched, and I just want to do a public congratulations, because you reached out to me, what was that, October, I think?
Yeah.
Late last year? And started chatting about it, and you had this idea. And again, I've been in this world for like the last 7 years with financial planners all over the world. And you said this, and I was like, yes, this is something that is totally needed. And, the members are listed on your website, which is the CIGAnetwork.com. And you can see, that's who people can actually go to and contact. So Levi Navlaki, who's in India, great example. He was on the podcast last year, one of the early episodes. He's an expert in Indian US cross-border situations. If you have a question, he's a great person to go to. But for people that are listening, financial planners around the world that are already in this world, maybe have expertise in working with globally mobile clients, how can they join?
Yeah, so I think the best way to do it is go to our website. So it's the CIGAnetwork.com. You will see the current members. So this is a by invitation only network currently, because we do want to have this basic level of trust and knowing that you will do right by the client, both on expertise wise and on certain level of fiduciary standards. So look at the website. You might find you already know one of us, like before you found out about CIGA, and you should definitely talk to one of our members that you already know or heard of, or in your same country, and see if you're the right fit. And if you don't see anybody, you know me, you can always send me a message on the website. And I do want to mention this. I know, Kate, you have worldwide audience, but people do know that you're from the US and there's a lot of US connection. I do mostly US cross-border, but the idea of this organization is really for advisors who are not necessarily have any US connection. So the idea is that the world is, out there, and and if you are UK, or if you're UK-based advisors with connections in the EU and Asia, you're a good fit as well. That's what we're looking for, so we can create that net, globally, instead of having all come out of a single country.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, having lived in Australia, there are tons of Aussies all over the world, and, people from the UK moving all over the world. Everybody's moving all over the world. Like that's what's so great, right? It is a very small world. And I think once travel opens up and everything, just based on conversations I'm having, there are a ton of people that are excited to try something new and travel somewhere else. I think especially now that they've realized how easy it is to work remotely, and people that might have thought that before, it's just been put in our face. And it's like, well, if I can do this here, I actually would love to go do this from somewhere else. So again, think this is a great network. There's a huge demand out there. I love that it's opening people's, eyes and hearts and minds
Mhm.
to not only the opportunity, but the need and the challenges of living and working with clients around the world. So I absolutely wish you all the best, and I will continue to support the network and would love to see a few people look at joining and show how powerful it is to collaborate with other financial planners and experts. Right? You've got experts in like tax and estate planning and all those different things.
Yeah, exactly. And I know, Kate, you're involved in having this largest global financial planning conference. So all of you who are already thinking globally, working with international clients, come check us out, come talk to us. And yeah, we'll love to have you and see how we can work together.
Yeah, wonderful. Hui-chin, thank you so much for everything you're doing. Thanks for being on the show today. And maybe one of these days we'll meet up again in person.
Mhm. Yeah, awesome. We'll do
Somewhere
that.
in the world. Let's make it
Yeah.
somewhere else.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.